Hello, I'm Caroline Fairchild, and welcome to Working Together Live, a show about equity in the workplace with the leaders changing the face of U.S. business. The U.S. is one of only a handful of countries in the world that does still not offer paid family leave at a national level. Even in the private sector, only about a quarter of U.S. workers have access to it. Our guests today are trying to change that. Joining me now is Danielle Weisberg. She is the co-founder as well as co-CEO of theSkimm. She's also on the marketing board of directors at Tufts University, and she is a board member at Ad Council. She got her BA in American Studies and English from Tufts. Danielle, welcome to Working Together Live.
Thanks so much for having me.
I'm so excited to have this conversation. And of course, you're being joined right now with your co-founder and co-CEO, Caroline Zakin. Carly's also the founder and head consultant of Hire Right, a rebranding consultancy company. Previously, she was an associate producer at NBC. She got her BA from University of Pennsylvania in political science, cinema studies, and creative writing. So Carly and Danielle, thank you so much for talking this through. When this campaign launched, it was back in October, and I immediately just saw post after post after post in my LinkedIn feed. And so I want to talk about what the impetus was for you guys starting this, and it's so great to have you guys on live. So let's just talk back to October.
Yeah.
Paid family leave was cut from the Build Back Better bill, which I don't know about you two, but I was just shocked that happened. So talk to us a little bit about what the impetus was for this campaign and how what happened on Capitol Hill led you to have this rallying cry really for the private sector.
So I think there were two pieces to it. The first is, unfortunately, I don't think that I was entirely shocked. I think that we've seen, whether it's Democrats in charge or Republicans in charge, we still don't have paid family leave. And we're one of only a handful of industrial nations not to have that. And we're the only rich country out there not to have a national paid family leave policy. So I think that, we hoped to see it done, but at the end of the day, what I shared on social media that day was what I think a lot of people were feeling, which was just kind of fed up with government, fed up with something that had such a high percentage approval rating from the country that doesn't need to be this hard to get off the ground, and just seemed like frustrated. Throwing my hands up in the air is kind of how I wanted to feel. Instead, I was chasing after my firstborn. He was, just over a year at that point, and took a picture of him, and Carly and I were texting, and she really, put it into perspective and saying that, paid family leave isn't a perk. It should be, a basic part of everyone's leave. It should be a basic part of how everyone works today. And then from there, that just very organic experience of us watching this unfold, being a working mom and texting not only my co-founder, but a friend about frustration as a business owner who's in a position to help, but also as someone who, would hopefully like to benefit from these policies. We just put the call out to our audience. And from there, they're the ones that turned it into a movement.
Absolutely. And I'm sure there are so many working parents, so many women who are joining us in the stream right now who just totally resonate with that feeling when that policy decision was made, and just texting everyone that they knew kind of with a WTF type of moment.
Yeah.
Carly, I'd love to hear from you. Take us back to that moment and that organic interaction that you had with not just your friend, but your co-founder and this woman that you've started this business and have been building for the past decade.
Yeah, I mean, I think, Danielle really captured the moment. We text as friends probably more than we text, about theSkimm, which is hard to believe. But I think you're right. I think I believe that everyone had that same WTF moment. And, I'm someone who I don't yet have children, but that doesn't mean that I wasn't flabbergasted knowing what my friends have gone through and knowing what I myself would hopefully one day won't have to be stressed about. And I just remember Danielle posted this photo actually in her family, which I'm on, her shared album.
I forgot about that.
Yeah, it was a shared album, and we were talking, just watching these headlines and realizing, we're not surprised that this didn't happen. It has become so political, and I think what we've seen is this generation of women who theSkimm reaches. You have to remember, this is a group of women that graduated in the recession. This is a group of women that are becoming parents during a pandemic and what we're calling the Great Resignation. She's gotten screwed, and she has not had faith or reason to have faith that her political leaders are necessarily going to fix it. And I think that feeling is what resonated for us both, where we're like, just post on Instagram, like very organically. We weren't thinking about anything bigger than that. And I remember going back and forth with our team of like, can we use this hashtag? And we kind of just made it one up on the spot. And we were like, I was literally just, visualizing what was it that our friends have gone through who don't work at places that, don't have competitive leave policies. And the influx of what happened and, what our audience came back with was honestly so much worse than I could even imagine, and how I think about it. And this is across industry, across the country, across different levels of seniority. And some of the anecdotes that have just really just stuck with me, there are two in particular. One is of a mom who had twins in the NICU, and she had to go back to work before her babies were let out of the NICU. And that was her leave policy. Another woman sent us a picture of her in labor, active labor, hooked up to a contraction monitor with her laptop on the monitor cart because she was trying to clock in at that midnight deadline of when her paid family leave eligibility would begin. I mean, we live in the United States of America. We are the richest country that does not have a national leave policy, and it's embarrassing. And I think what we really felt was there's two ways to go about this. One is, we can talk about how do we, talk to our leaders and legislators. And the other is, let's just try to make action now. And I think, again, thinking about what our generation has been through, we went for the latter. And we really thought, how do we make change one person at a time, one company at a time? And that's really how this movement began.
And there's just this dichotomy. You guys are covering a lot of these headlines, as you mentioned, in theSkimm every day. There are 1.1 million fewer women in the workforce today than at the beginning of this pandemic. And then you started this database. It's something that we know. And then some of the stories you guys are hearing are so striking. I want to bring up a few of them right now in terms of just what women are saying and what they're feeling right now in terms of what they think about their paid leave policies. We have, I think, the stories from women that you guys are hearing on your website that I think we're going to bring up right now to kind of show you some of these startling numbers that we're seeing right now. But they're droves of women saying, I felt uncomfortable about talking to my employer about this, or I wasn't sure what the paid leave policy was at my company. And even though we talk about these issues all the time, there are things that not necessarily we're still startled by. And so in starting this campaign, starting this petition, what were you startled by? What are some of the things that you're hoping are going to change?
I think there are two parts to it. I think the first is that we were startled by, as Carly said, just how bad it is out there. And I think especially the industries that have been hit especially hard during the pandemic, hearing what's going on with medical professionals, a pediatrician having a baby and then not even getting to spend the amount of time with it at home that she's counseling her patients to make sure that they can do. I think that we're seeing also big firms, whether it's banking, whether it is legal research, knowing that they are tackling the Great Resignation, going out there and talking about, how they can get their workforce engaged. And they're focusing it on things like wages, inflation, and how can we compete. And there is really a very overlooked answer out there, which is for both men and women offering a paid family leave policy. And I feel like that is something that gets glossed over so much. To me, this has gone way past being a partisan issue. And I think, our take on it is, as for the foreseeable future, this is not an issue that government is going to solve, for better or for worse. So then in the private sector, how can we look at the issues that we're facing? Everyone wants to hire. There's such competition for workers out there to not only get them in the door, but to be able to retain them. So looking at it that way, I think what is surprising to me is just it seems like such an obvious thing to implement. It seems like such low hanging fruit for companies to be able to provide this, um, for them to be able to think creatively about it. One thing that we see and that we really champion is that you should know and be able now to search our database that just went up of over 500 companies where we have their leaves searchable. You can go through it. And they can also use that as a way to comp where they are against what they're seeing and then make the decision that they feel is right for their workforce. The same thing with employees. I think it's shocking how hard it is to just get that basic information. We all know that legally you're not allowed to discriminate if there's a question that you're asking in an interview process, but it doesn't take away from the fact that it is nerve-wracking to go into that interview and to have to feel like the onus is on you to get that clarity. I think that that's really something that can easily change. I would urge companies out there to leverage this as a part of a benefits package that gets people to stay.
Absolutely. And what you just hit on talks so much to some of the implicit bias that goes into this. So let's just say that you are a woman who's trying to start a new job or a new career and you are thinking about family planning at this point. You might not want to start that conversation for fear of the implicit bias or unconscious bias that might come into the hiring decision of, oh, we're really trying to fill this role. Do we want it to be someone who's thinking about family planning? So I think that was really an aha moment for me when you guys started this campaign, was just the importance of transparency around leave. And we saw,
Caroline, we got a message this morning from somebody, a skimmer, thanking us for this and saying her biggest fear in an interview process was going to be highlighted or starred as on the mom track, as if that equals not a good employer or not a good employee. And that, I mean, just think about that. Mom track equals something bad. Dad track doesn't. I mean, it's so just astonishing. Like, it is 2022 and we're actually having this conversation. And so our goal again with this database is eliminate any anxiety that shouldn't exist but does in these conversations, and really force employers to step up and to be a part of this change. And again, it goes one company at a time, and we're already seeing companies actually change their policies to see how they can do better by their employees.
And as you just said, it is one company at a time. There's been more than 500 who have shared transparently their paid leave. We've seen a lot of these shares on LinkedIn, whether it's, I think we saw Snap, we saw Splunk, we saw Bank of America coming to LinkedIn and sharing what their paid leave policies were and doing it, in ways that was really transparent. Is this a sign to you that in a global pandemic that has an outsized impact on working women, that has put a shining light on the glaring lack of national leave policies in this country? Are companies stepping up? What are you seeing?
I think that we want to be optimistic and hopeful that they are stepping up. I also want to put it out there that one thing we want to make clear in this initiative is that it's not to shame anyone. It's to provide transparency both for the employer and for the employee. The employer is able to benchmark themselves. They can use it as a moment to brag, or they can use it as a moment to actually get feedback and start an organic conversation with their workforce. For the employee, I think it takes a lot of unnecessary stress and burden off of thinking about being able to plan for your future. So I think with having these conversations, with seeing it shared, I am feeling optimistic. And I also want to say, we are beyond grateful for the over 500 companies who participated in this initiative. Also, we want to be transparent about, theSkimm. We established our paid family leave policy, which is 18 weeks, before we had anyone at the company who was having babies that we knew of. It was years ago, and we didn't know how we were going to make it work, but we knew that this was going to be imperative given the mission that we have as a company, and also given the type of workforce and culture that we wanted to create. I think since launching this campaign, we've learned from what's out there. We also are an employer who's trying to stay relevant with this ever-changing workforce. We're trying to be competitive. We're really working on retention. And so, we also felt like we could do better given all the information that we're getting. So we're no longer distinguishing between primary and secondary caregivers, which means we're providing our full 18 weeks of paid leave to all parents. And for parents who have a child in the NICU, their leave starts after the child comes home. We also made sure to clarify that our coverage extends to surrogacy, to fostering, to adoption, all of these different pieces that we hadn't really included in the first policy. So I want to urge companies out there to think of it as a stepping stone. Put out there what their policy is, make it a conversation. This is something that we're not going to get from government. So it's on us as a workforce to work together collaboratively. And at the end of the day, we call on CEOs and boards to be supportive and to look at this as a key retention and engagement technique, because that is the biggest trend that we're all fighting right now.
Well, we've talked a little bit about just the onus that's right now on the private sector to, I would say, make up for some of the failings that we're seeing on Capitol Hill right now when it comes to passing national paid leave. I see a comment here from Jader in the stream. I also want to say hello to some other members who are joining us. We have Burl from Beverly Hills, Peggy from California, Leonard, who's joining us from Europe, and Fahad from Saudi Arabia. So wide variety of people joining us, having this conversation about some of the lackings right here in the US. But Jader has a lofty question. He wants to know about the biggest challenges as it relates to paid leave in the United States. What are the biggest impediments to making this happen? When you think back to the Build Back Better bill, what insights do you have in terms of just why this just didn't get passed?
Well, it's a longer conversation if we talk about why it didn't get passed, which is how political and divisive our government is. So I think that's a separate conversation, which we could spend a lot of time on. I think as for why certain companies, and when I say certain companies, I mean certain industries, like haven't necessarily created competitive leave policies, there's a few reasons. First of all, one, you look at what does leadership look like? We are now seeing women get a seat at the table. We're seeing her assume power, but many boardrooms and many C-suites do not have women yet and haven't for a long time. And so that means that they weren't considered really as part of the policies. It also put what should be a family decision and a family onus really on women only. And I think that's also why we worked really hard to transform our own policy to say, this is for all parents. This is not just the mom's job. This is really about supporting families. And then I think finally, a lot of companies, of course, look at the cost. And listen, we're not going to say that it's easy. It's no impact on an org to have a competitive leave policy. But what we can say is that it's worth it. And it's an investment in your workforce, and it's an investment in women in particular. And, I can tell you just personally this week, Danielle and I sat in a conference room with 2 other female executives at our company. And in 20 minutes, we changed our policy to make sure that we were enhancing it to be more inclusive. And we looked at each other and we're like, this isn't that hard. And, yes, for companies that are smaller, there's different considerations of cost and size and how you focus on coverage plans. But it really is a moment, I think, for companies to prioritize. And I think what we've seen is that companies that look a certain way prioritize certain things based off of that. And hopefully we're really seeing a seismic shift happen now.
The only thing I would really add about our political system is that, I think, and this goes for whatever party is in power, but given our election cycles, given funding, much bigger forces at play, there is a trade-off in making shorter term decisions that are going to get quick wins and bolster you. And I think if you look at long-term economic trends in this country, we need to make sure that we're not going to fall victim to population declines. And one of the biggest ways to do that is to make sure that women who now are making a huge part of the workforce, millennials have overtaken boomers. We know that women are a huge part of that. Are finding ways to be able to stay in the workforce and to be able to have kids. The more stress that we put on that dynamic, the more that as a government and society, we are not supporting her, the harder it is to be able to have a functioning society that's going to be able to have the population growth that we need to support things like Social Security, to be able to support the workforce that we've gotten accustomed to. And I feel like that longer term view really gets neglected, but we're seeing other industrial countries dealing with it.
I think that is such a critical point, but to play devil's advocate a little bit here, it is definitely not a critical point that I was thinking about when I entered the workforce 10 or so years ago. I don't think I even thought about questioning what the paid family leave policy was at HuffPost, which was my first job. And so I'm sure there are so many young workers who are now joining the workforce, and they're probably not thinking about this. What have you learned through this past time since October in terms of how younger folks should be thinking about the companies that they're joining and should be asking these questions, in some ways maybe to alleviate the burden from those who are further along in the family planning process?
I think that, first of all, as women, one of the things that we really prioritized was to make sure that we had policies that actually helped age with our team, and things that we wish that we had ourselves or considered ourselves. And so whether that's fertility benefits and thinking about how to support, looking into things like freezing your eggs, or looking into things like checking on your fertility before it actually is something that you're thinking about family planning. Those are ways that, one, companies can support employees early on in their career, but two, it's a great moment for those entering the workforce to think about what is the type of values of the company that you want to work with, and think about what are the types of benefits that maybe you don't need in the next 2 years, but maybe you'd want to think about 5 years from now or 10 years from now. And it doesn't mean that you're going to even be at the same job then, but it will start training you to think about the things that you should be looking for and asking for as you move throughout your career.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Danielle and Carly, as I was talking to you about pre-show, I'm such huge fans of what you guys have built at theSkimm, and even bigger fans now after this Show Us Your Leave policy that you guys have
likewise. That's such a treat.
On and off LinkedIn. It's been so great to see. Thank you for helping us further this conversation, and thanks for joining us on Working Together Live.
Thank you so much.
That was Carly and Danielle, the co-founders of theSkimm, talking to us about their new viral campaign that you can check out both on and off LinkedIn, Show Us Your Leave, encouraging companies to be more transparent about their family leave policies. I want to thank them for joining us on the show. Working Together is not just a live show, it's also a weekly newsletter that hits your inbox every Wednesday morning. So if you want more information about equity in the workplace and the faces changing the face of business, please be sure to subscribe by hitting the link that my producer is going to put in the stream right now. And if you want more from LinkedIn News Live, you can join us tomorrow at 12 Eastern. My colleague Andrew Seaman will be back with you to talk about how you can get hired with Swati Rejmi, and she's going to talk to you about how to find the right job for your skills. That's tomorrow at noon Eastern. I'm Caroline Fairchild. Thanks so much for watching Working Together Live.